If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, as well as follow me and subscribe to me on all my other social media platforms. What's up, Thrashers, and welcome back once again to the Thrash Maniac 99 YouTube channel, and I am back with another episode of Under the Radar. This week we are taking a look at 4 more albums from 2023, this time during the weekend of January 27th, and mostly it was all underground stuff that came out this past weekend. Nothing like super major came out. So it was a good opportunity to take a look at some new bands, and the first review I am doing is for a debut album from an Australian black metal band called Lumen, a.k.a. Mortem, with Upon the Edge of Darkness. So I got curious to check this one out because their drummer is a former drummer for Destroyer 666, a great blackened speed thrash metal band, and seeing that this was a black metal band, so I was like, well, we'll see how this goes, because like I've said many times before, and I'll keep saying it forever, I am very picky about black metal. If it's just nothing but tremolos and blasts, I'll lose you. But if you vary it up and add some different influences, then you're golden. And if one thing I can guarantee for sure with this album definitely has a wide spread of influence going on here. Yeah, you get your occasional tremolo riffs and blasts, but this album's mostly like groove oriented, or even at times it gets a little doom metal inspired. Like, I could almost compare this band and this album to like classic era Bathory, like Under the Sign of Black Mark, and even a little bit of Hammerheart and Twilight of the Gods, like the early Viking stuff from Bathory, but with black metal vocals on top. And I also hear a little bit of like a Celtic Frost vibe going on, especially with those like triplet swings that you get on here. So yeah, this definitely feels like an amalgamation of classic, early, proto, first wave black metal and modern black metal with a hint of like almost, I wouldn't say symphonic, but a more epic feel. Like, it has atmosphere, but it's not atmospheric black metal. It's definitely something unique and something different for me. And honestly, this is a good album to kind of zone out to and just kind of put in the headphones and just relax to it, but also feel a little uncomfortable. But it's almost like a soundtrack for a Tolkien story. And for those reasons, already I think I got my black metal album of the year. I'm giving this a 9.5 out of 10. I really enjoyed this. I just love how varied everything is and how the production was pretty well done. And just that snare. It's tighter than a chipmunk's asshole. But yeah, 9.5 out of 10. Now on to the second album for this week's Under the Radar, and it's another debut, and this one's an interesting one. This is a one-man death metal band out of Cornwall, England, called Seven Doors with Feast of the Repulsive Dead. So I got curious to check this one out because, yeah, it's a one-man death metal project, and it's also on Redefining Darkness Records, which I am a big fan of that label. After all, last year's Sentient Horror and Schizophrenia were in my top 5 albums of 2022. So I was curious to hear, what does this label have in store with a band called Seven Doors? Well, basically this album is everything I love about death metal. It's got thrashy riffs, it's got some killer triplet chugs, there's some doom sections, like basically everything about death metal I love wrapped up into one album. And this is very much in the vein of that classic Tampa death metal sound. Like, I get moments on here that remind me of early Death, a little bit of Deicide, maybe even some Obituary whenever things slow down even further, maybe even a little Asphyx whenever it gets into that more almost doom territory. And there are even moments on here that remind me of Blood Red Throne again, and even Cannibal Corpse. So yeah, this is just great old school death metal done in 2023 by one guy one guy doing vocals, guitar, bass, and drums, and production, and all this stuff. It's like, is this guy channeling his inner Dan Swano? Because holy shit, this guy is super talented. I can't think of a complaint on here, other than maybe... Well, never mind. I got no complaints, so this one, I'm gonna give a 9 out of 10. I think it might go up in score the more I listen to it, but for now, this is still a fantastic album. If you are a fan of classic old-school Florida death metal, definitely check this album out. You will not regret it. Now time for album number 3 for this week's Under the Radar, and it's yet another debut, and actually I think every album for this week is a debut, and we are now talking about the new debut album from Malleus with The Fires of Heaven. So this is a blackened speed thrash metal band from Boston, and upon doing research on Metal Archives for this band, the big bands that I see this band gets compared to, couldn't even get my words right, compared to were Hellhammer, Celtic Frost, and Bathory. So when thinking this is blackened speed thrash metal, I'm thinking based on that they're going for more of that like proto first wave black metal stuff, but with some of the modern thrash influence on top. And that's pretty much what I got on here. This almost feels like what would happen if Power Trip was a blackened thrash band or a blackened speed band. Because the production value kind of has that like modern Arthur Risk sound, even though Arthur Risk didn't touch this album in any way. It kind of has that production value where it feels like it's made in today's day and age, but also feels like it was made in like 1988. Or something like that, but there are some fucking crushing aggressive riffs, like the opening track, well, after the intro, it's just thrashy and just brutal right in your face. And then most of the other songs kind of have more D-beat, or even like a Celtic Frost or early Bathory groove, like the closing track especially. It also kind of reminded me a little bit of Megadeth. The one complaint about this album I have is the song Awakening or Awakened. That song was just an 8-minute, like, filler intro track, and it's like, I feel this album would have been higher rated if that track was cut away from the album, because it did kind of ruin the flow for me. But other than that complaint, this is a really good debut. 8.5 out of 10. Definitely this band has potential. Once they can cut down some of the fat on some of these tracks with being too indulgent with the intro sections or doing intro songs, I think this band has the potential to break out in the blackened speed thrash world. So yeah, 8.5 out of 10. And now on to the fourth and final album for this week's Under the Radar, and the last debut we're talking about this week, and it's from a Chilean thrash metal band called Trastorned with Into the Void. Now, upon doing research for this band, they're listed as blackened thrash. I don't really hear much of a blackened vibe. If anything, maybe more crossover thrash. Because there's a lot of, like, punky-inspired thrash riffs going on around here. Kind of like, I would almost describe this album as like a hybrid of, like, early German thrash and crossover bands from the States in the 80s, like Suicidal Tendencies, DRI, and SOD. Basically like a hybrid of those three bands and a hybrid of Creator, Sodom, and Destruction. And you get, I would say, is Trastorned. So, yeah, from what I heard with this album, it's short and sweet and to the point. Like, it's under 30 minutes. Doesn't really waste anything apart from the interlude track, which is about 2 tracks before the finale. But even with that interlude, there was some beautiful, clean guitar parts in that interlude. It's just, you put an interlude towards the end of the album, kind of weird again in terms of the flow, but aside from that little complaint, like, man, the production on here, it feels like 1985. Like, they're able to, I don't know what it is with, like, modern thrash bands getting this, like, old school sounding production to where it feels like it should have come out in the 80s. And this definitely has that sound, and I absolutely love it. The riffs, like I said, they're punchy. The beats, you can get like super fast. You can get some cool D-beat stomps. Overall, this is a strong thrash metal album. I give this a 9 out of 10. The only thing that keeps it from being higher is the interlude track. If that track was cut out, this album could have been a 9.5. But even with that, it's still an awesome album. I highly recommend you check it out. And that does it for this week's Under the Radar. Of course, there will be links in the description box for all the albums for you guys to listen to, and let me know your thoughts in the comments. But until next time, horns high, see you guys later.